My girlfriend asked me to fund her vacation to find herself and another man, but the only thing she finds is that she has no place to live when she gets back to the city. A few hours ago, I returned home after a long flight from the Caribbean. Since then, I've had time to process everything that happened, and while I've come to terms with how I feel, I'd like an outside perspective, opinions from people who don't know me or her. Maybe that'll help me see if I'm justified or if I truly am the bad guy in this situation. My ex-girlfriend and I had been together for 3 years. We met in college, and after graduating, our lives seemed to align perfectly. We both found jobs fairly quickly, but since I started working a bit earlier, my career advanced faster. This gave us the opportunity to take the next step in our relationship, moving in together. About a year ago, we rented a cozy apartment in the city. Nothing extravagant, but comfortable and ideal for two people building a future together. For the most part, things seemed great. Like any couple, we had occasional disagreements, but we always worked through them, or so I thought. This past year had been particularly stressful for both of us. Between work demands, adjusting to living together, and the general challenges of transitioning into adulthood, we agreed it was time for a break. A vacation sounded perfect, a chance to escape everything, just the two of us, in a tropical paradise. Since I was earning more than her at the time, I decided to cover the entire cost of the trip. Flights, hotel, excursions, meals, you name it. I didn't mind because I wanted this to be something special for both of us, a chance to relax and reconnect without any added stress. For the first few days, the trip was everything I'd hoped for. We soaked up the sun on the beach, explored the area, indulged in amazing food. It felt like a dream. But on the night before we were supposed to head home, she dropped a bombshell I never saw coming. She told me she wasn't planning to return with me. She said she needed space to think about our relationship and figure out what she wanted in life. She explained that she wasn't sure where our relationship was headed, and that this trip had made her reflect on many things. She told me she felt she needed to be alone for a while, but asked me to trust that everything would be fine between us once she returned, that she just needed time. At that moment, I was stunned. We were in paradise, we had enjoyed the vacation with no issues, or so I thought, and suddenly, she drops this on me. I didn't know how to react at first because her request sounded like some kind of disguised breakup. The worst part was when, after telling me all this, she asked me to pay for her extended stay and her flight back whenever she decided it was time to return. She claimed she needed this time to think and expected me to support her through this process. Seriously, who does that? At that moment, I was furious. I had already paid for the entire trip, absolutely everything, and now she was asking for more. She wanted to extend her stay at an expensive hotel in a foreign country and expected me to pay for her return flight when it suited her. I couldn't wrap my head around why she was asking me for this, especially when all she wanted was to get away from me, to think. It felt like she was trying to take advantage of me a little longer before definitively breaking up with me. I told her no, that if she wanted to stay longer she could, but she would have to cover those expenses herself. I had already paid for our vacation and had no intention of spending more money on what to me felt like a farewell party where I wasn't invited, or rather where I'd been kicked out early. The conversation got pretty tense after that. She told me I was being materialistic, that a good boyfriend would support her decisions, and that my refusal was a sign I didn't care about her enough. According to her, if I really loved her, I wouldn't mind spending a bit more so she could stay and have this time she so desperately needed. I tried to stay calm, but I was really angry. I told her I had already paid more than enough, and that if she wanted to find herself or whatever, she didn't need to be in the Caribbean to do it. I offered for us to go back together, and if she needed time to think, she could do so in our city. I didn't see the need to extend the trip just so she could reflect, but no, she insisted that staying there was crucial to her process. I didn't get it, or rather, I did get it, but I didn't want to accept it. It was clear she was looking for an exit from the relationship, and on top of that, she wanted me to finance that exit. That night, we went to bed without resolving anything. I was emotionally exhausted. I woke up early to head to the airport and go back home. When I got up, she was already awake, sitting on the bed, but we didn't talk. I knew that, no matter what happened, she wouldn't change her mind. I packed my bags in silence and simply left the room without saying goodbye. I knew this wasn't going to end well, and there was no point in continuing the argument. I took a taxi to the airport and tried to clear my mind, though I felt betrayed. At the airport, while waiting to board, I got a call from her. At first, I didn't want to answer, but I did. She was yelling on the other end of the line, furious. She was accusing me of leaving without paying for the extra nights, and that the hotel staff was kicking her out because her reservation had ended. The situation was simple. The reservation ended that day, and she didn't have the money to cover the additional nights she wanted to stay. She accused me of being a bad boyfriend, abandoning her in a foreign country, and being selfish and cruel for not helping her when she needed it most. I told her she already knew my terms from the night before, that I wasn't going to pay for her extended stay, and that if she wanted to stay, she had to cover those expenses herself. She responded with more yelling, calling me a terrible person for leaving my girlfriend without basic necessities. She accused me of forcing her to come back with me because, without paying for the room, she had no choice but to leave the hotel and rush to the airport to catch the flight we had booked together. The most absurd part is that she knew her credit card was maxed out, we had discussed it before. But still, she decided to pressure me into paying for those extra days, knowing full well she couldn't afford them on her own. Did she really think I would let her keep manipulating the situation? I had made it clear that if she wanted to stay, she'd have to find a way to pay for it herself. She could have come back with me, and in our city, she would have had all the time in the world to think about whatever she wanted. But no, she chose this path. Finally, I told her that whatever she did from now on was her business. I was already at the airport and wasn't going to lift another finger to help her. I hung up the phone after that, even though she was still yelling. I boarded the plane and came back home. Now that I'm back, after a long and exhausting day, I'm here wondering if I did the wrong thing. She made me feel like the villain in this story, but I still think what she asked for was completely unreasonable. I want to know if others think I was too harsh, or if I did the right thing by setting clear boundaries. So, am I the bad guy for leaving my girlfriend alone in another country after she tried to extend her vacation at my expense? Did I really do something wrong, or was I just protecting myself from being exploited? Update 1. A week after my original post, here I am again. I didn't think I'd be writing about this again, but after reading so many comments and receiving so much support, I realized I owed an update to all the people who took the time to read my story and respond. First of all, I want to thank everyone. Honestly, it helped me a lot to know that most of you agreed that I wasn't the bad guy in this situation and that I had done more than enough. It's comforting when impartial people see things the same way you do, especially when for a moment I started doubting my own stance. But here's the update, and believe me, things have taken a turn I never expected. The first thing that happened after I got home was something I never anticipated. I got a call from my ex-girlfriend's parents. It was the day after I returned from our vacation. To be honest, when I saw my ex's mom's number on the screen, I mentally prepared myself for her to yell at me or say something terrible for leaving her daughter alone in another country. But instead, the conversation was completely different. In fact, it was surprising. It was her mom who spoke, though I knew her dad was with her because I could hear him in the background. At first, it was formal, almost as if they were walking on eggshells. They said they wanted to talk to me about what had happened, and although I expected them to scold me, the opposite happened. My ex's mom started by apologizing. She said she was very sorry for what her daughter had done and that they were embarrassed by her behavior. She explained that they had raised her to be someone who worked hard, didn't depend on others, and certainly didn't take advantage of people like that. Up until that moment, I only knew what my ex had told me, that she wanted to stay in the Caribbean to find herself and think about our relationship. But according to her parents, the story was very different. Apparently, as soon as I left, my ex called her parents to ask for money. She wanted them to send her enough to stay longer and to buy her a ticket back whenever she decided to return. That was already bad enough, but what they told me next was even worse. Naturally, her parents, who aren't naive, asked her why she needed money and what had happened. At first, she tried to lie to them. She told them we had had a silly argument and that I, being childish, had left her alone as punishment. Of course, her parents didn't entirely believe her because they already knew me well and knew I wasn't the type of person to do something like that. So they started asking her more questions. The story she told them was a mix of half-truths and blatant lies. She said we had argued because I didn't understand her and that she felt trapped in the relationship and needed time to think. According to her, I had refused to understand her needs and, instead of supporting her, had left to force her to return with me. Naturally, her parents weren't convinced by this version, so they kept pressing her. What she eventually confessed left them as shocked as it did me. My ex told them that she had actually met someone else during the trip. Yes, you read that right. While I was paying for everything so she could relax, she had met another man. According to what her parents told me, her excuse was that meeting this man had made her question our relationship. Apparently, he made her feel things she no longer felt with me, and she wanted to explore those feelings before deciding whether to stay with me or not. Of course, she didn't have the money to stay and explore anything, so her brilliant plan was to get me to pay for those additional days while she figured out if she wanted to be with me or this new guy. That's what she ultimately confessed to her mother. I couldn't say exactly when she met this guy, but during the trip, there were a couple of days when we decided to do separate activities, something that seemed completely normal to me on a vacation. I wanted to go scuba diving, and she wanted to go on a jungle tour. I didn't think it was necessary to spend the entire day with her. After all, I trusted my girlfriend, or at least I did until then. I didn't think I had to be by her side 24/7, or else she'd cheat on me. What enraged me the most was realizing that all her talk about discovering herself was simply a way to disguise her true intentions. Basically, she wanted me to fund her romantic adventure with another guy. I can't describe the mix of rage and humiliation I felt upon learning all of this. Her parents apologized to me over and over. They said they never imagined their daughter would do something like this and that they were deeply ashamed of her behavior. They told me that at first, when she talked to them about the trip, my ex was excited about the possibility that I might propose to her soon. And here I was, listening to how she had met another guy in the middle of all that and was considering replacing me with him. After the call with her parents, I felt grateful they had told me the truth. Perhaps if they hadn't, I might have been naive enough to accept her excuses if she had come back saying she had reflected. But now that I knew the whole story, there was no going back. Well, after they told me this, I thought it would be the end of everything, but no. My ex came back to the country a few days later. I know this because instead of going to her parents' house, who had already told her they wouldn't take her back, she showed up directly at our apartment. She arrived while I was at work. She walked in as if nothing had happened, unpacked her things, and settled on the couch to watch TV like everything was fine. When I got home that afternoon, she greeted me with a smile and said hi like everything was normal. She said something like, "Hi, how was your day? I got back at noon, thought I'd rest a bit before going out to buy something for dinner." It was as if the past few days hadn't happened, as if nothing was wrong. There she was, sitting on our couch, acting like everything was okay between us. I asked her what she was doing there after everything that had happened. That's when she replied, completely calm, "Don't be silly, I'm back from the trip, and this is my apartment too, where else would I go?" That's when I lost my temper. I told her to stop playing games with me, that I knew everything. Her parents had told me what had happened and what she was planning. At first, she pretended not to know what I was talking about, which only made me angrier. I couldn't believe that after everything she was still trying to lie to me. I told her it was now the second time she'd lied to my face in a week and that she'd done it in 2 different countries, under 2 different jurisdictions. After pushing her a bit more, she tried to excuse herself, saying nothing had happened with that guy and that in the end, she hadn't stayed with him. She'd come back and everything was fine. But for me, the damage was already done. I told her that even if nothing had happened, the mere fact that she had planned to use my money to discover herself with another man was reason enough for me not to continue with her. I said that if she was looking for clarity, here it was, we were no longer together. I also told her she needed to find a new apartment, or if she preferred, I could take my name off the lease and she could keep the place. I didn't care, but we couldn't continue living together. Of course, she started saying it was unfair, that she hadn't done anything wrong, and that she hadn't ended up with anyone. But for me, that didn't change anything. If nothing happened, it wasn't because she changed her mind or decided to value me as her boyfriend. It was because no one paid for her week of indulgence. The intent was there, and that was enough. Then, when she saw I wasn't going to budge, she tried to appeal to my compassion. She said she had nowhere to go, that her parents wouldn't take her back, and that she was basically on the streets. I replied that this was no longer my problem, so I grabbed some things and left. I plan to take my name off the lease because I don't want to fight over that apartment, and I'd rather start fresh in a new place. Let her handle the payments. Update 2. This will be brief because there isn't much more to say, but I wanted to share one final update with those who have been following the situation. I recently officially removed my name from the lease of the apartment I shared with my ex, and as expected, it didn't take long for her to contact me. I got a call from her this morning, and it was the first time she contacted me since I left the apartment. Interestingly, she only wanted to talk now that rent was due, not a single call or message after everything that happened, but of course, when money's involved, that's when she wants to talk. She started the conversation in a friendly tone, saying we should sit down and discuss what had happened, as if she suddenly wanted to resolve things. But it was obvious she just wanted money from me. I told her there was nothing to discuss, that everything had been clear for a long time. That's when she stopped being friendly and moved on to the next level of her list of demands. She practically demanded that I at least pay a couple of months of rent. "Until I can figure out how to cover it," she said. It didn't take much thought to understand what she really wanted, more time to see if she could discover herself, meaning find someone to take care of her financial problems. So, obviously, I said no. I'm not going to fund even one more day of her life, her self-discovery, or any nonsense. I think she had more things to ask for if those proposals failed, but I didn't let her finish. I ended the call before she could continue and blocked her number right then and there. Honestly, I don't know why I didn't do it sooner. As for me, I've been staying at a friend's place while I look for a new place to live. It's been a bit chaotic, but I'm making progress, and I hope to move soon. Update 3. Well, I officially have my own apartment now, and I can also officially say that my ex has nowhere to live. Not that she's sleeping under a bridge like a troll or anything, but she's no longer in the apartment we used to share. From what I've heard, she's staying with a friend since, as her parents said, they didn't take her back into their home. Our former apartment was expensive, affordable for 2 people but impossible for 1. Since she no longer has my share of the rent to cover the costs, she's had to find somewhere else to stay, and it seems her friend has taken her in for now. Interestingly, instead of calling me directly, my ex has been using this friend to try to contact me. A few days ago, I got a call from her in a rather transparent attempt to get me to change my mind about the relationship. She tried to tell me I should give her another chance and that it was worth trying again. It was obvious she was repeating the same arguments she used before, the ones that didn't work then and certainly wouldn't now. I responded politely, which wasn't easy, that there was absolutely no chance of us getting back together and that I had already secured a new apartment, so I wasn't in a position where I needed to return to that place. The most awkward part of all this is that, despite the distance I've tried to put between my ex and me, I still have a cordial relationship with her parents. I've spoken with my former in-laws several times, and what they've told me is worth sharing here. My ex has been trying to gain their forgiveness, and at first, she approached them moderately, asking for another chance to come home, but they've been firm that they can't take her back. I won't deny that my ex-in-laws are a bit conservative in their views, and their rejection has a lot to do with their moral principles, but in this case, I can't say I don't understand them. At the end of the day, what my ex did, or rather tried to do, is something they simply can't forgive, not even as her parents. They told me they tried to explain to her that her behavior not only embarrassed them, but also deeply disappointed them. In their view, the fact that she tried to manipulate and betray someone like that was unforgivable. I'm not as rigid as they are when it comes to traditional values, but honestly, I think they're doing the right thing. No one should forgive something like that just because the person who did it is family. However, I've told them that if at some point they change their minds and decide to give her another chance, that's their choice. It's not my place to judge how they manage their relationship with their daughter. They've already done more than enough for me, and they don't owe me anything. That said, the story doesn't end there. When my ex saw herself rejected, she didn't react in the best way. They told me she went straight to their house and started causing a scene in the front yard when they told her there was no room for her. According to them, she began yelling horrible things at them, like calling them useless old people and saying the museum was looking for new fossils and they'd be perfect candidates. Honestly, I can't imagine someone saying that about their own parents, but apparently that's what happened. The worst part was what she said next. In a fit of frustration, she yelled at them that they were too old to love each other and couldn't understand how love works nowadays. She told them that if they didn't remember, it was probably because it had been too long or their memory was failing. My former in-laws told me those words deeply hurt them, and I think that's where any chance of reconciliation with her broke completely. Still, I'm surprised at the magnitude of what happened and how quickly everything fell apart for my ex. I suppose on some level I hoped she'd realize how badly she acted and try to rebuild her life differently, but it seems she's not ready to face reality. Update 4. It's been 3 months since the last time I wrote here. This update is shorter but equally surprising. It turns out my ex no longer even has her friend's place to stay. And before anyone asks where she's living now, I'll save you the trouble. I have no idea, nor do I want to know. I'm not going to reopen that door, and honestly, I prefer to stay as far away as possible from that mess. How did I find out about all this? Well, I got a call from her friend, the same one who had been hosting her after she was kicked out of the apartment we shared. It turns out the call wasn't to ask me for anything about my ex, but to try to hit on me. Yes, I know, it sounds strange, but let me explain what she told me herself. Apparently, my ex couldn't resist the temptation to ruin what little she had left. According to her friend, the problem arose when my ex started flirting with her boyfriend, who, by the way, has his own apartment. At first, it seems my ex was getting close to him with the intention of securing a new place to stay, but things went further. My ex wasn't just flirting with him. The friend's boyfriend ended up accepting her advances, and that's how the whole affair came to light. Once the friend found out what was going on, chaos ensued. The friend's boyfriend, in a desperate attempt to save their relationship, confessed everything and wanted to cut all contact with my ex to fix things. I don't know exactly what they argued about, but the only clear thing is that the friend not only kicked my ex out of her life but also out of her apartment. So now my ex has nothing and nowhere to stay, at least as far as I know. And here's where the situation becomes even more surreal. After telling me all this, my ex's friend, for some reason, decided the best way to get back at her was to try to hit on me. She made some sort of proposal to go out together, as if doing so would deal a final blow to my ex. I admit it was tempting, not for what she was offering, but because the idea of giving my ex a taste of her own medicine made me laugh inside. But I quickly realized it wasn't the right thing to do. The truth is, I don't want to be near anyone from my ex's circle of friends or ex-friends. They're just as toxic as she is, and the last thing I need is more drama in my life. I thanked her friend for the information and politely ended the call. Since then, I haven't heard from either of them, neither her friend nor my ex, and I hope it stays that way. What's clear is that, while my ex continues trying to take advantage of others to get by, it's no longer my problem. So, for those who followed this story, this is probably the conclusion.